Yes, I think ever since I can remember, it's something I think my mother told me that I would be the architect. I think ever since I was about 6 years old, and that was a major challenge because father was a game warden, and it seemed like an impossible dream, but he always said that nothing is impossible if you set your mind to it. Actually, when I went to Canadian University, I was told I didn't have the family background to be a royal architect. And I think we in Canada had some pretty narrow attitudes towards people of Native ancestry, and I have a different process of work, and I think that that was very difficult to deal with, and the only way I was really able to fulfill my dream and my ambition as an architect was to leave Canada and go down to Texas, where I had the opportunity of developing my own individual style. In Texas, being an individual is an asset, not a liability. I suppose I was influenced primarily by the work of the Baroque period, the Jesuit order, the period in the Reformation where they wanted to bring some excitement and vibrance and vitality and emotion into the church. And when I was educated in a residential school in a convent, my Catholic education gave me the opportunity of seeing those works of art. So it was the Baroque period, and then later on the Art Nouveau, the very organic works of people like Gaudi and Mendelssohn, and the late work of Corbusier, Rachamp, all of those architects who loved these very organic forms and had a great influence on my whole approach, including Frank Lloyd Wright. Only through my association with Father Merckx, where I was given the opportunity of designing a very organic building, that I was able to express my own style of architecture. Then later on, again, Grand Prairie College and some of my other buildings that were very organic had, again, wonderful patrons like Dr. Henry Anderson, the college, and the community of St. Albert. All of these people that encouraged me to, that liked my approach or style or expression of architecture, I think allowed me that opportunity of truly expressing myself in an organic way. Mm-hmm. And it was what I found, that if you really put a lot of time and energy in solving a functional requirement or functional needs and having a building really work for the people that you're serving, then those same patrons, in reciprocity, I think, give you the opportunity of more freedom of expression. They're happy that the building functions, then if you want to have it look in a certain way, they're willing to give you that opportunity. I suppose I just feel more natural in doing buildings with curves. And it was also what I was concerned about in studying the history of architecture is that the great works of architecture that I loved, like that derived from the Greeks and the Romans and developed, say, the foundation for the Renaissance and the Baroque and all that, were developed from nature themselves and from relating to the human form. The Doric, the Ionic, the Parthenon, all those buildings were derived from the natural elements of the area in which they were created. So all of those forms reflected the land and the people and the environment. If I developed a style that related more to our own environment, like the Group of Seven did in art, why couldn't I do the same in architecture? So that became my foundation for my whole approach to these forms, and I continually relate my forms more to the organic forms of the Americas. Well, primarily, as I explained, I felt that my roots are really here in the Americas more than in Europe or elsewhere, and so I wanted to develop an art form that had based, more on the land here. Now, and it was also a process of working together with people, working with a common vision, a more traditional approach to the process of evolving an idea from a dream or a vision into reality. So it's like the elders talk about, if you state your vision very clearly and profoundly, like an oath or a prayer, and it gives power to you give power to the vision by stating it clearly, and the way that you are able to bring that vision into reality is just keeping your word, and that vision will occur. And so always we start off the process with a very strong vision and have people agree with that vision, and we all share that vision, and our job is to make that vision into reality. So that sort of process is very very traditional. So I rely heavily on that base that I have from the elders in order to be the driving force of my whole process, the whole way I design, my own way of developing a project from just a dream into reality. Well, it was Father Merckx who had a vision of designing a church around the new liturgy at that time, and I worked with him, studied the new liturgy with him, and continually sketched forms of which were an interpretation of those shapes and forms that expressed the church. The church as being the altar as being a symbol and the reason for the space, the source of light and divine light, and the people gathering around the altar. All of those ideas and those shapes and forms were done with him. We'd meet all the time. I would sketch, and finally he would say, "Yes, that's it." And I remember even such things as the altar, just, he would describe, well, Christ is the symbol of the altar, and I would sketch it, and he'd say, well, it should be stronger, and then maybe I would say, well, I've carved it in stone, and then polished the stone here. No, Christ was a man who was rough, so okay, I'll leave the rough saw marks on the stone. Those kind of things that we would meet all the time and discuss that, and it was his vision of the church, and my interpretation of his vision, and he it was he was a wonderful client to work for, and I think it's people like him that produce architecture. I mean, without a patron like that, it would never have been able to have happened. You have to have people that really understand that architecture is an art, and that it's a piece of sculpture, and it's an opportunity to almost to be committed to a spiritual act, and Father Merckx was really one of my best clients and patrons. Well, we wanted to span 120 feet out of concrete in a totally amorphous shape, and the shape was defined by acoustics and also by the sight lines that I had resolved in the layout of the church, where I wanted the whole roof to almost be like a tabernacular tent-like structure with the main central skylight over the altar, and the lines of force of the whole space to be concentrated on the altar, which meant a specific shape and form. In defining that shape, the engineers advised me that it was a shape that was totally amorphous. Indeed, it was a dynamic shape that was almost taking a symmetrical shape and bending it in a way that was on the verge of collapse. And so, to resolve this problem, it would take 81,000 simultaneous equations, which would take 7 in 100 years just to work out the mathematics. And at the time, it seemed like impossible, but I remember the elders saying, well, when you walk out in nature, there's always, Creator has got an infinite variety of solutions. So I remember watching a spider build a web, and it was crossing a totally amorphous span, and thinking, well, that's what we need to span that space, because we were doing it without forms, because we had a very limited budget of $357,000 for the whole church, with all the furniture and everything, so we had to work within that budget. So it ended up also that I believed it was possible because we could do it through model analysis. But the elders always said that when you make a declaration, the universe shifts a bit, because when you declare something, there's a possibility it may occur. Without making a stand, there's no possibility. So we said, we're going to build this roof no matter what. Well, the Portland Cement Association, Dr. Alfred Palmer from Chicago, and we had cables from Sweden, and all of these things came together. And some mathematicians from Calgary, a fine group of engineers from Calgary. And we all got together and resolved it. We were able to run the calculations on a computer. It was not like what we have now, of course, in '65. It was all tubes, and it took floors, in the building, and we were able to develop the engineering in such a way that we calculated the loads one cable at a time. So what we did was we poured a ring girder around the walls, and then supported a central cone shape, and then strung cables all to the outside wall, so it looked like a big bicycle wheel, and then interwoven mesh, and then hung an inch and a half below styrofoam insulation wire to these cables. Then we poured concrete, and we post-tensioned the cables.
Yes, yeah.
And then in post-tensioning it, lifted 250 tons of concrete off the supports. And there it was. So that was the solution, and it was cheaper than a conventional. Well, when we were working with Father Merckx, the community, Father Merckx had always explained every step along with the congregation. But there was always dissenters because it was different. I mean, there was dissenters to the church itself because people didn't agree with the new liturgy and the openness of Pope John. Indeed, there's been subsequent regimes that probably believe that his reforms are too liberal. So it was naturally controversial, so there was people that liked it and people that did not like it. But in generally, I don't think the community really appreciated the church until it won awards, international awards, and then 10 years later the community Red Deer invited me in and gave me an honor award for the church in their community. So it had naturally been recognized by everybody else until it was recognized by the community. I think that Father Merckx, through his patronage, laid the foundation for my whole career. And the church was very important to me because it was a challenge for me growing up in the community of Red Deer. And to be able to come back and build a cathedral was very important for me. And also, both of my parents had their funeral services in the church. And I always felt that was my contribution to the community. And when the community destroyed it by another architect who professed to do a better job doing my work than myself, I could not believe him or the parishioners in buying what he offered, and I can't, I could not understand how an architect could say that he was being more sensitive and respectful of my work and do what he did. I feel, for example, the main precedents for, like, by law, you cannot, you should not, there's a moral obligation not to destroy a work of art. It's a Canadian law. And that and as far as my legal people were concerned, there was no doubt that the church in Red Deer was an internationally renowned work of art.
Absolutely, yes.
And when it came to, say, those wild geese in the Toronto Eaton Centre, when they put ribbons or something on them, they could not do that. And by law, that was used as precedent. You cannot deface a work of art. English judge, English artist. But for a major work of architecture, which is known all over the world, of which people, even in German newspapers, were saying, when the last time they were going to put an addition on the church, hey, what are you doing with that church in Red Deer? I mean, then for the community to blatantly disregard the intent of the laws of the country. And even when my legal advisors advised the church that they were going contrary to the laws of the land by doing it, did it anyway. And it says something for the community and for the architects. I think that computer is a wonderful tool for architects. I think that it can be a trap too, because we can always be controlled by all the technology that we create. But there's a wonderful opportunity to use that technology to really serve us as individuals and as architects. So I look at the computer by giving me more opportunity to be able to even create more sculptural forms and allow me more control over the design process and a better communication with expertise, like right now, from all over. Right now, by email and by modem and whatever, I work with engineers all over the United States and Canada. I can serve communities and not have to be always traveling back and forth. We can operate through computers and all the latest communication. We can, like we have with this project, scan in all the photographs of the mall and put the project right into the picture, so that people can visualize the building exactly where it is. What a wonderful tool and opportunity. But it can be also be used to mindlessly create endless repetitive things, and it can you know, to make money. And so I see it going both ways for architects. But we in our office look at the possibilities of it being able to you know, visualize a building in full scale and automatically dimension it, which gives us more time and energy to do the design, and let the computer do all the calculations while we spend more and more of our time on the. Well, it's a group of young people who wanted to celebrate the future. It was at the time, people were always having this doom and gloom attitude towards the future. And all these young people got together and said, we have young children, we want to look at the future as something to celebrate. And let's put together a space science center and catch the imagination of our children. And it was fun. They came to us, and they didn't have any money or anything, just all these ideas. And so we put down some sketches and drawings and made a study model of it. And they went out and they captured everybody's imagination, and finally they raised all the money, and then we were able to build it. It's 1 million square feet, and it had a very complex program where we had to house all the nation's treasures in the same conditions as an operating room throughout. And so there was challenges of environmental security for this wonderful collections that we have. At the same time, we wanted to ensure that these collections would be in proper halls to be able to present all the cultures of Canada. And the main challenge of the project was to celebrate all the cultures of Canada, not make it a mausoleum, but as a living museum where, which I could agree wholeheartedly with the Prime Minister Trudeau on that, was that he wanted to have it be that it would represent and enshrine all of our cultures, so that when a culture was presented, we'd be all enriched by that culture, rather than have this attitude that that we should be afraid or not accept other people's culture, that we have our own one culture that we have to impose on people. He felt that if we learned as Canadians the richness of having each person be able to express their own culture, and each person be able to be free to live in their own paradigm, their own world, and be able to share that with somebody else, that we would be broader for it.
Yes.
And I think that I feel that was a wonderful vision, and I think that was the challenge. There were other technical challenges, such as it was in a major earthquake zone, it was on a floodplain with the Ottawa River. We had to worry about all those technical problems. And it had a vast program, which and I suppose the major challenge was that he wanted it to be done right away. We started the design in March or April, and by that October we had made some 80-some presentations, had approval of a vast array of people, and then at a final meeting he railroaded it through cabinet, and then he came out of the meeting and said, start construction tomorrow. So we just had very rough schematics, and we had to proceed to construction. I felt it would take 2 or 3 years just to do the drawings before we would even think about construction. But the problem is we had to design and build the project at the same time with some 200 engineers and a cast of thousands from Montreal, which we had never really worked with before, and we had to assemble a team and be able to get the project done. So it was the logistics of doing it which was the major challenge, as well as the design too. So the original budget was the building original budget according to the program, original program was some 200 million. It was not reduced that much, and then there was a budget set for some 80-some million for the building. Everybody knew that budget was a political budget and was not adequate for the job. We kept addressing that. What are we to do? We're usually responsible for the budget. No, you're not responsible for the budget. But then, what are we going to follow, the budget or the program? No, follow the program. But the program exceeds the budget. But it was kept off, oh no, we'll solve the problem later. So we kept going. When the new government came in, of course, they wanted to know what the budget was. So the people there said the budget was 80 million. I said, no, hold on here. That budget is not 80 million. That's what was put in the kitty, but that's not what the budget is. Mm-hmm. So I put together the budget of 165 million. And I said, you have a choice of building the building for 165 million or building half the project for 80 million. And this is what you can do for 80 million, but it's your choice. The government looked at all the budgets and decided to not cut any of the program, but to build a building shell for 165 million. And then based on that final budget, we worked within that budget. Then we had to do the fit-ups. For the first stage of fit-ups was some $80 million, which was fitting up about half the halls. And subsequently, we've been working on finishing. An interesting challenge. We put the project, we did a program of the requirements, and I can't remember, it came to be some 50 million. And then they said, well, that's not the right political figure. So we said, well, that's what your needs are. So then everybody got involved and started saying what was required. So we did a matrix of all the mayors. Okay, this is what you said, this is what you said. So then we did a matrix, choose. So then they chose some, I think, $40-some million figure, which then reduced the size. We were completed working drawings on that basis, but at the final stages, they said, oh my God, the building isn't big enough. I said, yeah. Well, you're going to have to add another floor. Okay. We sort of anticipated that, but that meant we had to then renovate our working drawings by adding another floor, and it created a lot of problems. In the process, it was hard to find a cost because we were pushing it out for tender. And the tenders came in over budget. So we were asked to reduce the budget. So we degraded the building, trying to keep the same amount of air in the building. And we worked and resolved the matter with the contractor. And we worked it all out. Reduced the cost of the building because they were all running politically. And so therefore what happens when people run politically, and that's why I don't think a system like a region where the mayors are involved as representatives really work. because they're trying to each petition their own community. When it came to the general good, they're not interested in, you know, the region as much as they are petitioning their own community. So they have a conflict of interest because they don't want money going from their particular area to the region. They want all the money going to their particular community. So it's real. It just doesn't work. So we're working with this unwieldy process. I think the government of Ontario realizes that that whole system doesn't work. You should have representatives that are voted in from the communities, not have the mayors be there. But anyway, we had these mayors, 11 mayors or something we were trying to work with. And they're all initially all trying to get it to be in their community, which really created a problem because some of the mayors contested because they wanted it in their community. So there was infighting all the time. So this form of continual infighting was really, really difficult. So I was like, vote for me and we'll save money here and save money there. So okay. So the building was reduced, and then of course when we started, it was, okay, we have to put a whole bunch of things back in again. So then we had to, all of those layouts and departments and everything had to be all changed and modified. You see, they shrunk the building, they added on a floor, and then we hadn't gone back to what implication it had on the whole building, which meant that everything had to change again while we were already under construction. So here we are making all these changes and everything to meet all these requirements. And when you're under construction, of course, it makes it difficult because these are all extras and they cost a lot more than normal because you have a captive market. And it became more and more difficult to deal with. We had a project manager come in, and in many ways he took the contractor's position rather than our position. We were trying to defend the board from the contractors and subtrades, because when you have changes, you know, you're going to have extras, and there are sometimes you can't give the contractors what they want. You have to protect the owner from delay claims, everything else. So it ended up where the project manager and the contractor and the clients were overriding our recommendation at the contractor's interest. So and in many ways the project manager there hired bore no responsibility for his decisions. He was taking the role of an architect. So I went to the profession and I said, how can I run this job? Because I'm assuming liabilities for the decision of a project manager who's not an architect, who's not bonded. What am I to do? And they said, well, you have to make a stand because you are the architect on record and you bear the responsibility for the decisions you make. So therefore, you have to advise the client that this individual cannot make those decisions, particularly on paying the contractor more than you believe he deserves, even if he is a member of the community. And so I made a stand in saying that things have to be done in a proper and ethical way. Yeah, I mean, it's just like with the Museum of Civilization. I mean, when I was through, it cost me everything I had, because in our last negotiations, we submitted the costs for the firm and that, and for running the project, and we were not reimbursed for some $900,000. So it meant that it was a great hardship to myself personally, and it really was tremendous hardship to my company.
Yeah.
So, but it didn't help me any personally, but what I was concerned about is the commitment that I'd made to, you know, my own community, and to the people in Canada in general. I mean, it's not for any government, like it was not for the Mulrooney government. Like, who is he today? I mean, you know, he's not there. The museum is there, and the people are there.
Sure.
And we have over 1 million visitors a year visiting the museum, and their children, whatever, and it's for them. The thing about the museum in Ottawa, it was very much appreciated internationally, and it led me to receive this commission. And I think it is responding to the main intent of the mall itself, where we have these marvelous museums in a very strong neoclassic setting. But there is a fair amount of individuality in the buildings on the south side of the mall. If you look at buildings on the south side, the Smithsonian, the Hirshhorn, Air and Space, the buildings on this side are very different in architecture. Buildings on the north side are more classic. And if you look at it, the mall has enough strength that the buildings can have a fair amount of individuality, but the whole design composition the whole design composition hangs together. The important thing is keeping these setbacks, the heights and everything, appropriate to the adjacent buildings. So what we did is say, okay, there's a certain height, size, shape of stone that completes the overall composition of the mall. And it'd be like, almost like, okay, that stone has got to be preserved, like a stone that you get from say a Aboriginal sculptor, and say an Eskimo will take a stone and see within that stone a very powerful icon. So it'll just carve away enough of the stone that very strong shape appears, a seal or a bear or something, but you will still sense and feel the overall shape of the stone. So that was the challenge. Carve enough so that it expresses this strong Indian icon, but don't carve too much so it loses its overall shape. So that's the challenge that we have. I think there is a difference. And of course I always noted the difference when I've been crossing back and forth between the Canadian and American borders. And that is, Americans are always excited about new ideas, new opportunities. And they're willing to acknowledge people who make a contribution and work hard to make a contribution. And I think that's a wonderful attribute Americans. I'm always excited about it. Of course, I love this profession, and I continually have clients that have great vision, and just like this project, it's most exciting. And like in this project, I'm working with people that I've always wanted to meet, you know, in the International Founders Council, and people like the Rockefellers and the Blocks and the Donners and all those great people who have contributed so much to America, and wonderful people like Ted Turner and the media and all these people, as well as the Smithsonian, a most fantastic institution. And all the people I've met even today, the architect of the Capitol, the wonderful people like Carter Brown of the Fine Arts Commission. I mean, it's just the wonderful people you meet along the process, and the contribution they're all making. I think it's extremely exciting. I was just working a little bit with the people from Saudi Arabia on a science center, and then after the war, everything was shelved. But I'd just love to work in the Middle East, and I know that after the museum in Canada, where we were so badly hurt by the end result of that, I was sitting down with the elders, and they said, "Well, Doug, you're going to have to be an international architect."
You are.
So that I made this submission, and here I am. Well, our schedule is that in 2001, 2002, we have to have the big everything complete.
Oh, I see.
But there's so many people we have to, please, and
Satisfy, yes.
and they all make subtle changes, and that's fine, as long as it's like a theme, we have to be flexible,
Yeah.
and then their changes have to fit within the overall